Hi everyone. When we were kids, we all dreamed of finding a treasure in the forest after watching the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. In real life, of course, such cases are extremely rare, and usually this happens only during professional archaeological excavations. But sometimes, people discover something completely unexpected in their backyard, or during a daily walk. Today, we will tell you about the most unusual random finds, from lost animals to the treasures of the 18th century. Let's get it on. Searching for a dog. This story is not so much about random findings. One day, Kate Clayton was walking her dogs in the forest of the English city of Altrincham. Suddenly, both Jack Russell Terriers, Hannah and Dexter, broke off their leashes and ran deep into the woods. Although this was by no means a wild forest, it still carried many dangers. So, Kate panicked and started looking for her pets with her family. 7 hours after the dogs disappeared, Dexter was found and rescued from a rabbit hole, but Hannah was nowhere to be found. The owners searched for the entire day and got pretty desperate. They came home and put an appeal to help find the dog on the internet. The next day, several people came to the rescue. For many hours, they searched every inch of the forest, but all in vain. When almost all of the holes in the area were dug up, one of Kate's friends suggested calling a rescue team. Specialists began to look for the dog with the help of poles and special listening devices until they finally found the animal. One of the team members was chest deep in a burrow when he could feel a paw, then a collar. Of course, Kate was afraid that the dog would be dead by then, but Hannah turned out to be a real fighter. She just had to go through a quick check at the vet and cleaned up, and that same night the dogs were already peacefully sleeping beside their owner as if nothing had happened. Antique decoration. In recent years, some countries, like for example Wales, have witnessed an increased number of ancient artifacts discovered by ordinary people. But this has nothing to do with the theory about treasures hidden by pirates. The reason is actually simple. It has become much easier to purchase a professional metal detector today, even if you are not an archaeologist. That is why more and more ancient artifacts are added to the collection of the National Museum of Wales every year. Some of them even date back to the Bronze Age or the Middle Ages. 6 years ago in Wales, several amazing artifacts from the 17th century were discovered, namely a male ring and a precious bird figurine. The funny thing is that the guy who found these treasures didn't do it on purpose. He was just hunting rabbits in the forest and accidentally stumbled upon these objects in one of the holes. How exactly they got there is a mystery even archaeologists can't explain. Mammoth skeleton. Very often, amazing archaeological discoveries are made by people who work with the ground, for example farmers or builders. Of course, we're not talking about some secret underground cities. Usually the discoveries amateurs make are modest, but sometimes there are exceptions, just like in this story. 2 farmers from the US state of Michigan were draining their fields when suddenly they stumbled upon a huge snag. Upon closer examination, it turned out to be not a tree, but a real skull of an ancient mammoth with well-preserved tusks. Needless to say, the find made local paleontologists ecstatic because the bones of the prehistoric animal were in almost perfect condition. Scientists estimate that this creature lived in the local area from 11 to 15,000 years ago. Most likely, it was killed by hunters who buried their remains underground to preserve the meat. According to experts, this is an extremely important finding for studying the history of man on the North American continent. Ancient ships. Alexandria is one of the oldest American cities located in Virginia. It was founded at the end of the 17th century by the English colonists, and for many decades it was the most important port city. And during the Civil War, the first skirmishes between the northern and southern states happened here. So yeah, the city has quite a history. So it would be really weird if there hadn't been any archaeological discoveries here. In 2015, at the construction site of a new hotel, workers stumbled upon a buried ship, which was built about 300 years ago. Local archaeologists decided that it was a cargo or military vessel, but actually, the ship was built in the mid-18th century in Massachusetts. After that, it set sail to Virginia, was moored to the shore, and covered with earth in order to expand the urban area. Surprised? Actually, this technique was used quite often in the past. In San Francisco, there are entire districts built this way. They were made with the help of the ships abandoned by the people who arrived in California during the gold rush. A little later in 2018, 3 similar ships were found on the territory of Alexandria. Archaeologists also managed to unearth nearby animal bones, jewelry, tokens, and coins. Viking treasure. Everyone knows that these Scandinavian countries are the homeland of the medieval Vikings, the heroes of many modern films and series. The Swedes, Danes and Norwegians are very proud of their history and honor the legacy of their ancestors, and some even make incredible discoveries. 4 years ago, 3 amateur archaeologists found the jewelry of the ancient Vikings in Denmark, and you might not believe it, but it was the largest archaeological discovery of this type in the history of the country. All the friends needed was standard metal detectors and a bit of luck. They carefully selected the excavation area. The discovery was made in the region where the likelihood of finding the treasure was high. All in all, they dug up 6 gold bracelets and a silver one. They most likely belonged to the Vikings, who lived here about 10 centuries ago. The treasure seekers admit that at the time of the discovery, they couldn't restrain their excitement. They shouted, jumped and danced like children. Well, we can see why. Gold mine. In the closing months of World War II, when the victory of the anti-Hitler coalition was only a matter of time, the defeated Nazi armies scrambled to hide the gold stripped from various nations during the European occupation. However, they had very little time, so their attempt to save those riches failed. Most of the treasures of the Allied powers were successfully recovered and returned to their rightful owners during the advance. One of the most interesting stories happened on April 6, 1945, when several American soldiers were patrolling the streets of the German city of Merkers. They met 2 French women on the way. They were so-called displaced persons, that is, foreign women who were brought to Germany for forced labor. The passers-by told the police that there was a salt mine in the city, which in the previous months had turned into a real gold vault for the locals. The MPs believed the 2 strangers, reported to higher command, and soon went to the salt mine, accompanied by generals. There, the soldiers really found 7,000 sacks with gold bullions, nearly 100 million francs, and many personal items belonging to the victims of the concentration camps. Fenn treasure. American collector Forrest Fenn is one of those people whose lives are definitely worth turning into a movie. After his service in the Vietnam War, the veteran decided to devote himself to art, even though he had no experience with it. However, Forrest turned out to be a talented person. Within a few years, he started running his own gallery. In the late 1980s, several unexpected tragedies occurred in his life. His father died, and he was later diagnosed with cancer. That's when the man decided to leave a very unusual mark on history. Forrest buried a valuable treasure worth over $1 million somewhere in the Rocky Mountains. According to him, there were gold nuggets, rare coins, jewelry and gemstones inside the chest. Later, he publicly declared the treasure hunt open, and in 2010 published his autobiography with a small poem inside. According to the former gallery owner, it was supposed to help with the search. For over a decade, many people claimed to have found the treasure, but could give no proof. In all this time, about 350,000 people tried to find the treasure, and some of them even died during the dangerous expeditions in the mountains. This year in June, Forrest published an official statement on his website, where he said that the treasure had finally been found. According to him, the small poem helped the anonymous lucky guy. By the way, Forrest has long since beaten cancer and promised that he'd take the treasure back only if its value exceeded $10 million. It is a shame, but he was a bit late. Time capsule. For centuries, people have been sending messages as time capsules. There's something romantic about the whole thing, imagining how in a few decades the future generations will be reading the lines that you wrote. This practice is quite common in schools, and the capsules were also repeatedly launched into space with the hope that they'd be intercepted by aliens. Today, in the era of the internet and social networks, there are even virtual services created for sending messages to your future self or other people after your death. But sometimes, the messages to the future are forgotten or remain unfound. This story happened in 2014 in the American city of Boston. There, in a wall of the Massachusetts State House, plumbers discovered the oldest time capsule ever found in the United States. It was hidden there in 1975 by several American War of Independence heroes. A few weeks later, the capsule was opened at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. There were several dozen antique coins, a bronze medal with George Washington on it, newspapers, a state seal, some documents, and other items dating back over 2 centuries inside the copper box, all of them of a special value for Americans who greatly honor this period of their history. Favorite pet. Unfortunately for some American states like Oklahoma, catastrophic natural phenomena like tornadoes are not uncommon. At the end of May in 2013, for example, the local town of Moore was hit by a tornado with a diameter of 3 kilometers. The funnel speed exceeded 300 kilometers per hour, and as a result, several dozen people were killed, and a huge number of schools, hospitals, and residential buildings were completely destroyed. The total material damage from the natural disaster was estimated at $3 billion. Barbara Garcia was one of the victims of this terrible cataclysm. After learning about the approach of the tornado, the Moore resident took her favorite dog under her arm and locked herself in the bathroom to wait it out. After the tornado dissipated, Barbara discovered that her pet was missing. But don't worry just yet, this story has a surprising ending. Right when the woman was giving an interview to one of the American channels, someone from the film crew noticed a strange movement under the pile of metal sheets. It turned out that Barbara's pet was stuck there, so their reunion almost happened on live TV.
Hi, puppy. The dog. Oh, help me.